It was early morning when the driver picked him up. The city was quiet. Gray clouds hovered above Los Angeles, heavy and slow. It was Keanu Reeves' birthday. The driver didn't say anything at first. Most people didn't when Keanu was quiet. He sat in the back seat, looking out the window, holding a plain brown bag. The driver finally broke the silence. "Happy birthday, sir." Keanu smiled gently.
Thank you.
The driver asked, "Any plans for celebration today?" Keanu shook his head. "Not for me." As they drove through the early streets, something felt different. Keanu wasn't dressed for an event or a party. He wore old jeans, a simple shirt, and a dark jacket. There was no team following him, no cameras, no stylists. The bag on his lap looked worn out, soft from being folded many times. The car stopped at a corner in East La, not the kind of place where people expected to see a movie star. "You can wait here," Keanu said. The driver hesitated. "Are you?" "Sure, just 10 minutes." Keanu stepped out and walked alone. The sidewalks were cracked. A few people huddled near a building, some sitting, some lying on cardboard. One of them, an older man with a gray beard and tired eyes, looked up. Keanu walked toward him slowly, knelt down, and opened the brown bag. He pulled out a neatly folded jacket, a pair of gloves, and a sealed sandwich. "I thought you might need these," Keanu said. The man stared. He didn't know what to say. His lips trembled a little. You're Keanu Reeves?" he whispered. Keanu smiled. "And you're Michael. I remember you." The man blinked, confused. Keanu reached into the bag again and pulled out a photo, an old one, faded and creased. It showed a young man in army uniform, standing beside a tank. "You were a tank mechanic," Keanu said. "Germany, right?" Michael covered his face with his hand. "That was a long time ago." Keanu nodded. "Doesn't mean it didn't happen." They sat in silence for a moment. Michael finally took the jacket and the sandwich. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're welcome," Keanu said. "You mattered then, you'd still matter now." He stood up and walked back to the car. The driver looked stunned. "Was that someone you knew?" "Not really," Keanu said. "But I read about him once. Forgotten heroes stay forgotten unless someone remembers." The driver didn't say a word as they pulled away. He couldn't. They drove to a second location. A small daycare in the South End. The building looked old, but colorful. Keanu walked in without making a sound. The children didn't know who he was, but the teachers did. One of them gasped when she saw him. "You came back," she said, holding her hands to her mouth. Keanu nodded. "Like I said." Carried in 3 boxes, stacked neatly, each with books, toys, and art supplies. "I remembered your wish list," he told her, "and I added a few extras." The teacher began to cry. No one ever keeps promises like that anymore. Keanu reached into his jacket and handed her a card. "If anything breaks or runs out, call me." One child walked up to him, tugged his sleeve. "Mister, are you a superhero?" Keanu knelt down to eye level. "No, I just try to help." The little boy smiled. "Then you're better than a superhero." Keanu's eyes softened. He said goodbye, hugged the teacher gently, and left. Outside, the driver was still processing what he had just seen. "Sir," the driver finally said, "I've driven a lot of famous people, but I've never seen anyone do what you're doing today." Keanu looked at him with quiet eyes. "A birthday's a reminder. I'm still here, still breathing, still able to give." The driver nodded slowly. "You're giving more than gifts?" The next stop was a women's shelter. Keanu didn't walk in with cameras or press. He entered through the back, where a woman named Gloria greeted him with open arms. "I didn't think you'd come again," she whispered. "Birthdays are meant to be shared," Keanu replied. He placed down another bag. This one held prepaid phones, grocery gift cards, and handwritten notes, each one sealed in an envelope. "Every woman in this building is a warrior," he said. "I just want them to feel seen." Gloria took his hand. "You have no idea how much this means." "I do," Keanu said, "'cause I listen." They stood in silence for a moment. Then he turned and walked away, not needing thanks or attention. But one girl had seen him through the glass. She had been watching him, She couldn't have been more than 15. As he walked past her, she tapped the window. He turned. She held up one of the notes. "This your handwriting?" she asked through the glass. Keanu nodded. "You wrote that I'm not broken?" "Yes." "You don't even know me. You don't need to be known to be worth something." Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't speak again, but her hand stayed pressed to the glass. Later, as the sun began to set, the driver asked where next. Keanu looked at the list in his hand. He had 5 more places to go. "How many people are you planning to visit?" Keanu looked at the sky. "As many as I can before midnight." The driver asked carefully, "Do you ever do anything for yourself?" Keanu leaned back in the seat. "This is for myself. Giving helps me breathe." They continued on. To a library that had lost funding, to a community garden where children planted hope with their bare hands, to a small rehab center where no one recognized his face, but still listened when he read poetry out loud. At one stop, a young man asked him why he wasn't out celebrating with stars and champagne. Keanu paused, then said, "When I was young, I used to think birthdays were about people giving me love. I know they're about giving love to people who need it." The man looked down at his feet. "I wish more people thought like you." Keanu smiled. "They can. They just need to remember how." As night fell and the last of the bags were gone, Keanu asked the driver to take one final detour. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Home? Yours?" Keanu shook his head. "Hers." They drove to a small nursing home on the edge of the city. The air was cool, the building quiet. Inside, a woman in her 90s sat by the window when Keanu entered. She didn't react at first. Her eyes were dim with age. Then she smiled. "You didn't forget," she whispered. "Never," Keanu said. He took her hand and sat beside her. "You always told me, when I was a boy, to give something before I take anything," Keanu said. She nodded slowly. "Have you been giving today?" "Yes, all day." She smiled and leaned back in her chair. "Then you've had a good birthday. It's the best," Keanu whispered. They sat in silence. 2 souls connected by a lifetime. Outside, the driver watched through the glass. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. As the clock neared midnight, Keanu finally stood. He leaned down and kissed the woman's forehead. "Happy birthday, Grandma," he whispered. And as he left the room, the stars seemed a little brighter, the night a little softer. Because sometimes the greatest gifts are not the ones we receive, but the ones we give without asking anything in return. The next morning, the news began to spread. Not on TV, not on gossip blogs, not in flashy headlines. It started small, through phone messages, social media posts, whispers at coffee shops. Someone had seen Keanu Reeves at a shelter. Someone else had spotted him leaving a daycare. Another person said he was reading poetry at a rehab center. None of them believed it at first. Why would someone like him spend his birthday with strangers? But then the photos started appearing. Blurry. At first, taken from behind or through windows. People didn't post for likes or attention. They posted because they were moved. They posted because they saw something rare. A girl from the women's shelter shared the note Keanu had written. It said, "You are not your pain, you are your strength." Another post showed him kneeling beside a homeless man tying the laces of a worn shoe like it was the most important task in the world. Another one had no picture at all, just words from a librarian. He came in and asked if we had any books about hope. Then he donated 100. By afternoon, the story had reached someone who never expected to hear it. Her name was Camille. She was a struggling journalist, fired from 2 newsrooms, barely paying rent, using a borrowed phone. She had no money, no followers, and no faith in the world. But that morning, she had been scrolling with half-closed eyes when she saw a single post. Keanu Reeves spent his birthday giving, not taking. She sat up in bed. Something about that sentence stuck in her. She looked at the photos, read every caption. Then she put on a coat and left her apartment. Her mind was racing. This wasn't a story. This was something deeper. Maybe she didn't believe in fairy tales anymore, but she still believed in truth. And this story felt like truth. She reached out to the woman at the daycare, and the man at the shelter, then the librarian. Each one gave her the same answer. "We didn't call the press. He told us not to. He said it wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing others. He left before anyone could thank him." Camille took notes, filled 3 pages, then she stopped. This wasn't about writing an article. It was about understanding the why. Why would a man who had everything choose to give quietly without attention? Why would he spend his own birthday making strangers feel remembered? She started calling more people. A kid who'd seen Keanu at the community garden, a volunteer at the poetry reading, an old man who said he'd been handed a hot meal and a scarf at sunrise. Each voice added another layer, another thread. Camille knew she couldn't publish the story in a normal way. It would get twisted, turned into clickbait, lost in noise. So she posted 1 sentence on her own page. Keanu Reeves spent his birthday changing lives. If you were one of them, share your story. She didn't expect much, but in 1 hour, her inbox flooded. Messages came in from all over the country. One from a woman whose son was in recovery. He read a note from Keanu. Now he wants to live. One from a barista in Los Angeles. He didn't say who he was. He just paid for 10 coffees and said, "Pass it forward." One from a veteran who hadn't spoken to his daughter in years. Keanu. "He's told me it's never too late to called. She picked up Camille, sat back, breathless. The man wasn't just giving things. He was giving people back to themselves. Meanwhile, Keanu had no idea any of this was happening. He was back. Home, sitting on the floor of his kitchen, feeding his dog pieces of leftover chicken. He looked tired but peaceful. His assistant, Mia, stood nearby with a concerned look. "You've been off the grid for 36 hours? Keanu shrugged. "I needed the quiet." Mia handed him a phone. "You might want to see this." Keanu took it. The screen was filled with hundreds of messages. Videos, photos, thank-yous. He frowned. "I didn't tell anyone to share anything," Mia nodded. "They shared it because they needed to." Keanu scrolled slowly. Each message felt like a piece of someone's soul. "You reminded me I matter. You helped me breathe. You don't know me, but you saved me." He put the phone down. "I didn't mean for this to go public." "You didn't need to," Mia said. It went human. That night, something unexpected happened. Camille's post got picked up by a small podcast. Not a big one. It's just 2 friends who talked about kindness every Sunday. They read the messages aloud, shared the stories. The next day, a retired teacher in Chicago played it for her students. A woman in New York sent the episode to her boss. A firefighter played it at his station. By the end of the week, it's the whole internet knew, but instead of jokes or gossip, the comments were filled with reflection. Maybe we've been celebrating the wrong way. I want to do something on my birthday. This year, kindness isn't weakness. It's courage. And then came the videos. One man gave out socks to a homeless camp, saying Keanu did it. Now it's my turn. A girl donated art supplies to her school. Family cooked extra meals and left them by the park bench. No one was trying to go viral. They were just giving. The internet didn't know how to handle it. It wasn't chaos. It was calm. It wasn't hate. It was healing. Even some celebrities quietly joined in. No hashtags, no press. Just silent acts of kindness. And still, Keanu stayed quiet. He didn't post, didn't comment, didn't correct the facts or tell people to stop. Because for him, this was never about being seen. It was about reminding the world how to see each other. Then came the letter. Camille received it on a Tuesday. No return address. No name. Just her name handwritten in blue ink inside. 1 sentence. "Thank you for not turning a human moment into a headline." She knew who it was from. She held the letter for a long time. And she cried. Not because it was sad, but because someone finally reminded her that stories can still matter when they're told with care. That weekend, something beautiful began. A movement. Small, quiet, and powerful. People called it the birthday ripple. It meant giving something. On your birthday, a call, a note, a sandwich, a moment, no money needed, no camera, it's just heart. And it all began with one man who spent his birthday walking through the city, giving quietly, expecting nothing. The world had watched. But more importantly, the world had learned. 3 days after Keanu's quiet birthday, something strange happened. He went out for coffee like he always did. Same street, same small cafe, same old man who ran the place. But this time, when Keanu stepped inside, every person in the cafe looked up, not with the usual stares or whispers, not with phones raised, just silent recognition. Warm eyes. Small nods. Keanu walked to the counter. The old man behind it smiled. "It's on the house today," he said. Keanu shook his head. "Gently, I can pay." "You already did," the old man said. "It's just not with money." As Keanu waited for his coffee, a young woman walked up to him slowly. Her hands were shaking. She held something wrapped in cloth. "I don't want a photo," she said quickly. I want to give you this." Keanu looked at her. Was nervous. Maybe 22. Maybe younger. "What is it?" he asked softly. She unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small clay figure, rough, imperfect. It looked like a man kneeling beside a child. "I made it," she said. "What you did, it reminded me of my dad. He passed last year. Used to do quiet things for strangers, too." Keanu held the figure carefully. "It's beautiful," he said. Her eyes filled with tears. "You made me want to be like him again." Keanu took the sculpture and nodded. "You already are." That moment didn't go viral. No one recorded it. The barista behind the counter whispered something to her coworker as they watched. Kindness has a shape now. Keanu left the cafe with the sculpture wrapped in cloth, holding it like it was gold. Back home, he placed it on a small shelf near the window. Beside it, he laid a note, "For those who kneel so others can stand." He stood there in silence for a while. Something inside him was shifting. Later that evening, Mia came by again. She had something in her hand. "You've started something," she said. Keanu raised his eyebrows. "I didn't mean to." "But you did," Mia said. "And now, schools are calling. Organizations. Even a foundation in Canada wants to create a giving day inspired by your birthday." Keanu didn't answer it. First, he looked out the window. "I'm just a man." "Not a movement, maybe," Mia said, "but movements start with men who care." He didn't respond. "Not yet." Then Mia placed a small box on the table. "Someone mailed this to you," she said. "No name, no address." Keanu opened the box slowly. Inside was a crumpled photo and a note. The photo showed a boy, no older than 10, standing in a hospital hallway. His eyes were closed, but he held up a small drawing of a man with long hair, sitting beside a patient. The note said, "My brother's cancer hurt him less the day you visited. You didn't know us, but you sat with him. Thank you for reminding me people don't need to be famous to be kind. It's just human." Keanu put the photo down. "I remember him," he whispered. That night, something else unexpected happened. Camille, the journalist, received a call. It was from a producer at a major media outlet. "We saw your post," they said. "We want to interview Keanu. Tell the full story? Prime time, huge audience." Camille hesitated. He didn't do it for attention. "But the world needs to see it," the producer insisted. Camille thought hard. Then she said something that surprised even herself. "You're not the right person to tell it." The call ended. And for the first time in months, Camille felt peace. She didn't need to sell the story. She just needed to protect it. Meanwhile, something quiet was happening across the world. A boy in Brazil made lunch for his elderly neighbor. A girl in India cleaned a local park without being asked. A woman in Greece left clothes at the door of a stranger's home after hearing they lost everything in a fire. No hashtags. No selfies. Just human to human. The ripple had turned into a quiet wave, and still, Keanu said nothing to the press. He stayed home, reading books, writing in a small notebook, walking his dog. But inside, he felt that something had changed. Just around him, but inside him. One morning, he visited his sister. She was ill, quiet, her room filled with light and the smell of jasmine. She looked up and smiled. "I saw what you did," she said softly. Keanu sat beside her. "I didn't do much you never think you do." "But you always do," she said. He held her hand. "You once told me, the best people don't try to be known. They try to know others." She nodded, and that's why people remember them. Not for their face, but for how they made them feel. Keanu didn't speak. His throat tightened. His sister squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you." He stayed with her that afternoon. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Sometimes presence is louder than words. When he left, she gave him a folded piece of paper. "Open it when you're ready," she said. He placed it in his jacket and walked away. 2 nights later, he finally opened it. Inside was a single line: "Don't let the world praise you louder than it hears the ones you help." He stared at it for a long time, then he smiled. He knew what he had to do next. Not bigger, not louder, just deeper. He began writing letters. Hundreds of them. By hand. Each one went to someone whose story he had heard because of Camille's post. A veteran in Arizona, mother in Minnesota, a teacher in New Zealand, boy in South Africa. Each letter was simple, honest, full of hope. He didn't sign his name with pride. He signed with respect. "Keep going," he wrote. "You matter." And slowly, those letters began to arrive. People opened them with shaking hands, read them with eyes wide. And again, the world didn't explode, just softened, in a time where everything was fast and loud and cold. One man reminded people what warmth felt like, and he did it without shouting, without trying, without needing anything back. Just a pen, a hand, a moment. It had been 2 weeks since Keanu Reeves' birthday, and the world had already begun to change, but not in the loud, flashy way the world usually changed. This was slower, softer, deeper, and Keanu noticed it everywhere he went. When he walked into a bookstore, the clerk didn't ask for a selfie. Instead, she placed a wrapped book in his hand and said, "This helped me once. Maybe it'll help someone you meet." When he went to his usual mechanic, the owner refused payment and said, "Just promise me you'll keep reminding people to be kind. That's worth more than fixing a tire." When he passed through a park, a boy ran up to him and handed him a small drawing. It was a picture of a tree giving its last apple to a stranger. "You're the tree," the boy said. Keanu knelt down. "And what are you?" "I'm the one who will plant another," the boy replied. That night, Keanu couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with candles lit, looking through letters, gifts, and stories people had sent. The world was waking up, but not because of him. It's because of what kindness had reminded it to become. He picked up one letter in particular. It was written in pencil, no return address. "Dear Keanu, I was planning to end my life last month. Then I saw a video of you sitting with someone who had nothing. You looked at him like he was a king. No fear, no pity. Just love. I decided to wait one more day. It was 21 days ago. Now I volunteer at a shelter. Thank you for saving a stranger without knowing you did." Keanu read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside a book. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for staying." Outside his home, he found a small note left under a rock. No name, just 3 words. "You changed me." It wasn't praise. It was a mirror. And he felt it in his chest. The next morning, Keanu did something he hadn't done in years. He reached out to someone he had once pushed away. His name was Elliot. They had grown up together, best friends. But fame, time, and pain had stretched them apart. They hadn't spoken in almost 10 years. Keanu called. There was a pause. "Keanu? Yeah, it's me." Silence. "You okay?" "I'm trying." "To be," Keanu said. "You sound different." "I feel different." "So why now?" "Because I've been reminded that it's never too late to come back." I met 2 days later at a quiet bench near the beach. Elliot was older. So was Keanu. Both had wrinkles where laughter and loss used to be. "I never stopped hoping you'd call," Elliot said. Keanu looked out at the waves. "I thought silence protected people from me, but I forgot how much silence can also hurt." Elliot reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo. It was from when they were both teenagers, standing in front of a small stage after their first failed play. "You said something that night," Elliot said. "You said one day we'll tell better stories." Keanu smiled. "Maybe today?" "Is that day?" They sat there until the sun dipped low. No fame. No cameras. Just 2 old friends, trying again. After that meeting, something changed in Keanu. He started writing letters again, but this time, not to strangers. He wrote to people he had hurt, people he had forgotten, people he had once loved and drifted from. He didn't ask for anything, didn't explain. He just said, "You mattered then. Still matter now. I see you. I'm sorry. I'm thankful." One of those letters went to a woman named Leela. She had once been part of his life, not a lover, not quite a friend, something in between, someone who had taught him how to listen, someone who left when he couldn't. She read the letter on her porch, then held it against her chest. She didn't reply. But a week later, she left flowers on a stranger's doorstep with a note that said, "You are seen," and that ripple kept moving. Meanwhile, Camille, the young journalist, had found herself in a strange position. People were asking her to write a book, start a podcast, even turn the story into a film. But she said no. Instead, went back to the daycare Keanu had visited. She volunteered to read to the children every Friday. She helped clean, brought in paints and colored paper. She didn't want to become famous for kindness. She wanted to become kind. One day a girl tugged on her sleeve. "Are you the one who told the story?" Camille smiled. "Which story? The one about the man who gave away his birthday?" Camille knelt beside her. "I didn't tell it, I just helped people hear it." The girl nodded. "I want to be someone worth hearing." 2. Camille's heart nearly burst. And far from all of this, in a quiet town in Japan, an old monk heard the story from a student. The monk lit a candle that night and placed a single stone on a wooden table. He said softly, "Every act of kindness is a stone in a river. It changes the current," and the current was changing. Slowly everywhere. Keanu didn't attend galas, didn't accept awards, he declined all interviews. But one morning, he did something no one expected. He called Mia, his assistant, and said, "Can you find the names of every person who wrote to me?" "You want to respond to all of them?" she asked. "No," he said. "I want to meet them in person." "Yes, all of them. As many as I can. Not on stage, not in a line, just quietly. Human to human." And so began what would later be known as the journey of stillness. Keanu Reeves would travel. No cameras, no press, no publicists. He would sit across from people, listen, hold hands, bring a flower, share tea. No big speeches, no lessons, just presence. And each time he left them with one simple sentence: "Thank you for reminding me that the world is still good." And every time he said it, he meant it. The journey of stillness wasn't something anyone could track on a map. There were no tour dates, no press releases, no social media posts. It was one man moving quietly across cities and towns, knocking on doors, sitting in kitchens, sharing silence and stories with strangers who had once written him letters from the deepest parts of their lives. Keanu Reeves didn't wear sunglasses or a hat to hide. He didn't come with gifts or speeches, just came as himself. A man with deep eyes, tired hands, and a soft voice. His first stop was a small town in Montana. A girl named Ruby had sent him a drawing. She was 10 years old. In her letter, she said she didn't have friends at school and that sometimes she sat alone during recess and imagined. Talking to Keanu, she didn't think he'd ever read it, but one quiet afternoon, her mother opened the door and found Keanu standing there. Holding the same drawing Ruby had sent, the little girl peeked out from behind the hallway. When she saw him, she froze. "Hi, Ruby," Keanu said softly. "I liked your drawing. Can I see where you made it?" Ruby's eyes filled with tears. She nodded and led him to her room, where he sat on the floor beside her art table. They talked about colors, and stories, and how hard it is to feel small in a loud world. When he left, he didn't take a photo. He just left a note on her table. "Keep drawing. Your world matters. Word spread, not fast, not viral. But like music you hear from a distance, quiet, slow." Pulling people in next, he visited a man in Detroit named Yalan. Yalan had written that he'd once been in prison, and during his worst night, he'd watched an old film starring Keanu and remembered what hope felt like. He didn't ask for anything. He just wanted to say thank you. So when Keanu knocked on his door, Yalan didn't believe it at first. He opened the door halfway, unsure. "You wrote me a letter," Keanu said. "I came to say thank you, too." They sat in Jalen's small kitchen, drank tea, talked about mistakes, about second chances, about how sometimes even when the world turns its back, one moment of light is enough to keep you going. Keanu listened more than he spoke, and before he left, he looked Yalan in the eyes and said, "You don't owe the world perfection, just truth. And you've already given that." Yalan never forgot those words. Over the next few weeks, Keanu traveled quietly to 10 more places. A small village in Mexico, a church basement in New Orleans, a farm in Scotland. One night he sat under the stars with an old woman named Enid, who had sent him a poem. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "You shared a part of your heart," he replied. "The least I can do is share time." They said nothing for nearly an hour. Just watched the night sky, listened to wind. And at the end, Enid said, "I lost my husband 5 years ago. Tonight is the first time I've felt him near since." Keanu placed a hand over his heart. Maybe kindness brings him closer. As his journey continued, he refused hotel rooms. He stayed in guest rooms, couches, sometimes even small sleeping bags near fireplaces. He wanted no comfort that others couldn't offer, and slowly, something began to happen, not just in those he visited, but in himself. Keanu started sleeping deeper, eating slower, listening better. He started writing again. In his notebook, every night before bed, he wrote down one sentence from someone he had met that day. A child said, "Trees are like people, just don't talk much." A father said, "I'm not broken, I'm rebuilding." A woman said, "You looked at me like I still mattered." He didn't just collect quotes. He collected souls, and somewhere along the way, the world began to shift more deeply in small towns and big cities. Birthday celebrations started to change. People began the tradition of the giving hour. Instead of receiving gifts on their birthday, they would give something an hour of service. It's a letter, a meal, a walk with someone lonely. Some people laughed at it, called it a trend. But for others, it became a way of healing, because it reminded them that being seen was not about being famous. It was about being present. In a school in Florida, a girl stood up on her birthday and gave every classmate a handmade card. Hospital in Germany, a nurse gave her extra break to sit with a patient who hadn't had a visitor in 3 weeks. In a prison in South Africa, 3 inmates cleaned up the yard and said it was for the next guy who needed a clean start. And across oceans, Keanu kept walking, until one day, something unexpected happened. He collapsed. Not from sickness, not from pain, but from exhaustion. In a small town in Canada, during a visit to a youth center, Keanu passed out on a wooden bench. After reading poetry aloud to a group of teens, a nurse nearby helped him. He woke up in a quiet room, a warm soup beside him and a blanket over his chest. Mia arrived the next day, worried. "You're burning out," she said. "I'm fine," Keanu whispered. "You can't help others if you disappear yourself." He closed his eyes. "I just didn't want to stop. There's still so much pain out there." Mia held his hand. "You've done enough. Now rest. Please." Keanu stayed quiet, then nodded, just for a little while, and so he rested. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to receive, and, as he lay there, he heard laughter outside. The kids from the youth center were playing, and someone was reading from his notebook aloud, saying the sentences he had written from all the people he'd met. They weren't reading it like a book, or reading it like a prayer. Keanu smiled. Maybe the wave didn't need him to carry it anymore. Maybe the kindness had learned to move on its own, and maybe, just maybe, the world was finally starting to remember the simple truth that a birthday isn't about growing older. It's about remembering who you are and who you choose to become. Keanu Reeves stayed in the small Canadian town for 5 more days. He rested. He slept. He walked slowly near the frozen lake each morning, wrapped in a borrowed coat. The youth center staff watched him quietly, never asking for pictures, never crowding him. They had seen what exhaustion looked like, and they had also seen what healing looked like. On the 6th day, Keanu stood outside just before dawn. His breath formed soft clouds in the cold air. He held his notebook in one hand and a small folded piece of paper in the other. It was the note from his sister, the one she had written before he started this journey. "Don't let the world praise you louder than it hears the ones you help." He read it again, slowly, and this time he felt it. Deep in his bones, it was time to return home, but not to hide, and not to rest forever. He would return to build something. Not for himself, but for the people whose stories he had carried across cities, countries, and hearts. When he got back to Los Angeles, Mia was waiting with a list. "You have invitations from all over the world," she said. Keanu smiled softly. "I'm not interested in stages or spotlights." "I didn't think so," Mia replied. But one of the letters wasn't an invitation. It was an idea. She handed him a printed email. It was from Camille. "Dear Keanu, you didn't ask for this story to be told, but the world needed it. Now, the world wants more than stories. It wants space. Space to connect, to rest, to give, to be still. What if we made that space? Not a brand? Not a business. A home." Keanu read it once. "Then again, she's right," he said. "But it has to stay quiet. No marketing, no logo." "What will you call it?" Mia asked. Keanu looked at the window. "The table? Just the table?" "Yes," he said, "because everyone deserves a place at one." And that's how it began. The table opened 3 months later. It wasn't in a tower or studio. It was in an old community building tucked between 2 laundromats. There was no sign outside, no security, just a door that stayed open every day. Inside, there were books, couches, fresh food, quiet music, and a long wooden table where strangers sat beside each other, not to talk about success or fame, but about pain and peace. People came from everywhere, not to see Keanu. In fact, most never saw him. He didn't want it to be about his face. He showed up only when it felt right. He served tea. He cleaned. Sometimes he read poetry. Sometimes he just sat and listened. Volunteers came. So did teachers, veterans, former inmates, young artists, and grieving parents. No one had a title. No one had to explain why they were there. There was a basket in the center of the table where people could leave notes, thoughts, drawings, truths they didn't know how to say out loud. Keanu read them all. Every night, and still, he kept giving. On his next birthday, the door to the table opened at 8 a.m. And one by one, people came in not with gifts, but with stories. A woman brought cookies and said, "These are from my late husband's recipe. He would have loved this place." A man brought his guitar and played a song about second chances. A boy sat beside an old woman and held her hand while she cried. And somewhere in the back, Keanu sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't speak until a girl walked up to him and said, I know who you are." Keanu smiled gently. "Who am I?" "You're the man who reminded the world how to breathe." Keanu looked at her. "What's your name, Lucy? Do you like being here, Lucy?" "Yes. It feels like the world stopped rushing for." A moment, Keanu nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." A few days later, a well-known journalist visited the table. They didn't take photos or write an article. Instead, they left a note in the basket. "In a world that taught us to shout, you taught us to whisper again." More tables began to appear. One in Chicago, another in Seoul, a third in Johannesburg. All inspired by the quiet kindness of one man who had once given his birthday away. No one owned them. No one promoted them. They simply opened and stayed open. And over the years, Keanu Reeves stayed the same. Humble, listening, giving, he aged like everyone else. Slower, softer, his hair grayer. His steps quieter, but his eyes stayed full of fire. It's the kind that burns. Slow and warm. And every birthday, without fail, he gave something. A meal, a letter, a present. He never told anyone what to do, just reminded them, in his own way, that the heart of giving doesn't come from having much. It comes from having love to spare. And when people looked back years later, they didn't remember the movies or the fame or the interviews he never gave, They remembered the day they read his story, the day they gave their first gift, the moment. They felt seen, because sometimes the most powerful stories don't end with applause. They end with a door left open, a chair pulled out, someone waiting quietly at the table, just in case you need a place to sit. And that was the real gift he gave the world.